Hello, everybody, and good morning if you're joining us live today on Asymmetric Habits. And my name is Jerry Handley, owner of Viking Performance Training, a strength and conditioning center for all to come and relish in the gains. And my good friend here, Jonathan Pishner, owner of Apex Counseling. So he is a meathead who poses as a professional, who is a professional counselor. I am a nerd who poses as a professional strength coach, basically all the time. But welcome. Today's episode is on conflict. And this is a big thing. And what we're really going to look at is when strategies and actions to try to help people decide, like, make the best choices possible for when to face conflict or when to try to avoid it. I think I speak for most people that most of us are taught early on, like when we're kids, to try avoiding conflict. And then it reaches a point where conflict does become necessary to some degree, or it's unavoidable. And depending on how, like, been taught anything about it, or if it was a very, again, just blanket statement, avoid it, a lot of us feel unprepared when it comes to that. And that can either lead to bad decisions or simply, like anxiety, fear about what to do. There's just a lot wrapped up in situations where conflict arises, or even just the potential of it. Like, I feel like this is one that's very draining, has a big effect before it's even happened, but just when it gets into our mind. And so we thought this would be a good, useful topic to cover with people.
And bookmark that word draining because we're coming back to that for sure. One of the things that people accidentally do is they make bad decisions around conflict in both directions. They avoid the ones that would actually be really useful to have, and then they have the ones that are completely pointless. But the reason I wanted to do an episode on this today is because it sounds like it would be horribly complicated because there's hundreds of different types of conflicts you can get into. But really, there's a couple of useful rules and heuristics that if you apply them, you can actually know what to do in 95% of those kind of cases, as long as you've just taken a few minutes to think through some stuff. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this today, because it's surprisingly simple if you know what to think about and how to approach certain stuff.
I feel like, this is one of the most common situations where people tend to really blow up, like what's coming, like blow up what we're facing, if we think about it too long ahead of time, but aren't prepared with the tools to actually face it, like I said, in a productive or healthy manner. Like I said, when it's just kind of like, oh, like I don't want to do this, or like, whether it's a hard conversation or just another type of issue, the more time we let ourselves think about it leading up to it, but without tools in place to actually navigate it, it just takes on that like bigger and bigger and bigger, like big, bad, scary monster. And then, it's just such a cycle that's hard to get out of and deal with. Like, it does a lot of damage before it's even come.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with one that applies to all of them, because this one is where people easily lose track of stuff. If I'm going to have a conflict, or if I'm going to avoid it, doesn't matter which thing I'm looking at, is what am I trying to make happen in this situation? What do I want to have happen? So let's do a couple of like ones that apply to basically everybody. So if I'm deciding if I want to basically bring up a tough thing, say with a love partner, I recognize that I'm potentially going to start a conflict. Hey, you are behaving in a way that I'm not too sure I like. I might ask you to change that. Obviously, that's potential for conflict. One of the things that a lot of people do badly is they lose track of the thing that they want to have happen. Because when they start approaching conflict, and especially with a love partner, with somebody that's important to them, they start accidentally pursuing the goal of, I need to prove I'm right, instead of the goal of, I want to improve the relationship. So,
Interesting. Okay.
yes. So whether pursue or avoid conflict, you should have a goal, and it should be a sensible one. Let me just go ahead and yank this one away. If the goal is prove I'm right, that's probably not a useful goal in most scenarios. That almost always just turns into a mess. But goals of like, I want to improve the relationship, so I'm going to pursue talking about this. I mean, that makes sense. You can flip it around to avoid. Like, okay, my goal is I want to make this relationship better. I know this person is not prepared to address this at this time. Let me just let this go for now. Maybe we'll come back later because I know it's going to cause a conflict that can't possibly arrive at anything useful. So kind of knowing, habit number one around this is know what you want to have happen and make sure that the action step that you are pursuing has some reasonable chance of making that happen.
I like that a lot. So what, like, is there a bet, like, if you decided that that conversation needs to happen, what are good tips for how to enter into the conversation or bring that up?
Almost always softly.
Mhm.
I have never yet been a part of a conflict that had a reasonable goal where it was useful to come in fists swinging.
Right. Mhm.
I have never ever, at least I can't think of an example. I mean, if I, maybe I'll stick it in the comments if I happen to think of one later, but I can't think of one right now. Uh, if the goal is, something where pursuing the conflict becomes important, entering it softly is key. And let's pursue the love partner example for a moment. I know I need to have this conversation. I can choose to come in swing and be like, look, the things you are doing are dumb and I need you to change. Like, I mean, okay, who's going to listen to that? Ever since we've been 13, if somebody approaches us with that, I mean, we just shut down and like reject it, right?
Right.
But if you come, hey, look, the thing you're doing is really bothersome to me. Can we talk about this? Because this is just not working for me. Most people are going to be at least way more open to that second one. I mean, when it's somebody you can tailor it a hell of a lot more than what I can do to a generalized audience, like I'm doing right this second. But no matter what the approach is, come in soft, because no matter what, the conflict will have a chance of heating up. So you don't want to start at an 8 out of 10 and get it to 10. When it heats up, you want it to get from a 3 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10. That's what you want to have happen.
That makes sense. Yeah. So this might be a little bit basic, but I'm actually curious. I mean, I feel like it's basic because it's generally good advice. And sorry if I can't remember the actual term for it, but like what came to mind was, assuming it's a like verbal kind of like a conflict conversation, probably involves criticism of some sort. But
Sure.
kind of the old fashioned, like the sandwiching criticisms, like starting off with something positive to say, like you're saying, start it gently. Does it normally work pretty well if you start off with something positive to say, then follow it with the criticism that you're trying to like bring up as that you think could be conflict?
I am a little agnostic towards that for one reason. So things like I statements, sandwich scripts, that's the thing you were trying to come up with, sandwich script. Those are not bad, but they're not great either, because and it's like what we do. Sometimes it's really hard to speak to a generalized audience, but when you're going to speak to an audience that huge, what you end up having to do is making it so anybody can do it, even if they are not very bright at all. So that's one of the reasons I like to give the principle of, okay, come in softly, because you might come in with a sandwich script, hey, I really love you, but this is a problem for me, and I really want our relationship to go well. Like, that's a sandwich script.
Okay.
But if I just know sandwich script and I don't know come in softly, look, I really like you, but you're being a dumbass right now, and I would prefer to like you more.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I mean, if you take the principle out and just do the script, like it's still kind of jacked up and it doesn't work.
So what about like say then going into or explaining your results. So this is kind of what you were saying earlier on. Like if you softly like explain your desired end result first, and then kind of try to talk about how you like the things that you feel need changed or like to lead to that, would that potentially get across a little bit better?
Depends on the person.
Okay.
Some people, have trouble tracking backwards from a result to a what we're doing now. Um, so that's individualized enough. I would have trouble saying yes or no. I'm going to have to cop out and be like, oh, it depends. The thing I would encourage people to do is know who you're talking to, because what a lot of people will accidentally do is they will. Oh man, God, this happens all the time. Uh, People will talk to their adult children as if they're still 5.
Oh, okay.
And so if we're talking about a family conflict, well, you got to know who you're talking to. And so you can't just approach them as if, if you can't approach your adult child as if they're still 5, because that's not going to work. So that goes into know who you're talking to, know what they'll connect with. So the thing you're asking is like, will this work? It really just depends on who we're talking to and if they'll connect with that personally.
No, that makes sense to know who you're talking to. Like that right there is really good advice is to think about that, because I think kind of like how you mentioned earlier about one thing is a lot of people go into argumentative conflicts kind of with that I want to be right mindset first, and remembering what the end result is. It like well any that type of like I'm going to be right tends to come across almost the same every time you do it, because it's me focused. It's like I'm going to do this, so
Right.
I'm going to basically try to force myself as being correct on this and fight and defend it, rather than actually opening up for what the other person needs to hear who you're talking to. That's good. So, what are times like so far we talked about conflict that you pretty much know is coming and is going to be in an argument, or like I mean in a conversational way. So what
Mhm.
are kind of like in like still sticking on that type before we kind of expand into others, what would be some good like a checklist to kind of run for yourself about like which one's worth pursuing versus which one isn't? Because you
Oh,
touched
that's a
on it.
great one.
Yeah, you touched on it a little bit, but to go a little bit deeper into that, like when should you go for it? When should you just either avoid it or at least postpone it?
Okay, so let's start with this. I said we would go bookmark and come back to it. All conflict is draining. And one of the things that's important that people kind of mess up is they won't approach their battery properly. So, maybe I know I need to have this conversation with somebody, but it might be unwise of me to do it at the end of a long day and I'm already drained, because what's going to happen if I approach this with an empty battery? Uh, I'm going to lose my emotional regulation. And then how am I going to approach them softly? That's not going to last very long, because it takes some amount of energy to keep yourself in check. So, one of the things a lot of people will accidentally do is they will sadly approach it with an empty battery, and they actually have the skill to have an important conversation, but they've timed it wrong. So then they lose all their skill and they just make it worse for themselves. Same thing when you're talking to somebody else. You got to respect their battery a little bit too, because one of the things people will mess up is they'll start a conversation, it's going okay, but the other person runs out of battery and they signal that they're running out of battery, and they're like, hey, look, I'm getting pretty tired, can we come back to this later? And a lot of people follow some advice that is not really good, which is, no, we need to resolve it now. You see this a lot with love partners, but it can be other stuff too. And so if you don't respect their battery, they're eventually going to lose their emotional regulation, and then it's going to end up in the same spot. One of the things people mess up is you can actually do both. You can do a pursue and avoid conflict. you can bookmark it and come back to later. That shit doesn't have to be resolved right this second, especially important stuff. I mean, that's one of the things I end up working with couples a lot is it's okay if we have to have this conversation 12 times before we come to a resolution, because sometimes it's complicated. Sometimes people are just not ready for change. Sometimes people really got to work on seeing the other person's viewpoint. So you don't have to resolve everything immediately, and oftentimes you can't anyway.
Yeah. I really like the picture that paints. I think that's really useful, is remembering that this doesn't have to be an argument. Like I said, like that's the main. It doesn't have to be an emotional argument. It can be like I mean, I feel like it can be a passionate argument if you feel that strongly about it, but that doesn't mean it has to be like we're fighting each other. Like remember that these conflicts, assuming that the end result is for what you think to be like a greater a win-win situation in essence, and you're kind of trying to get somebody else to see it the same way, or realize that, then approaching it almost just like firmly with your points, but not letting it cross over into emotional argument status is, and how that also means that like that's also part of the value of like adding it time, like you said, extend it, cover it multiple times. Because like I used to fall very strongly into that. No, we're doing this now, camp. And that was for almost everything. Like that was every form of conflict for me. Like I said, like not just a love partner thing. It was like any issue that I came across, whether it was in my business, training, whatever. Like it was like, no, I'm going to figure this out now. and while that can have value at times, I said usually the more dependent that involved other people, the less valuable, the less helpful it was. Whereas,
Yep.
yeah, I feel like maybe addressing it or talking about it, but then figuring out, like I said, like other times to look at it, as it gives you time to strategize the pieces. It actually makes it way more. I mean, yeah, like it honestly makes it like more tactically helpful, and which usually increases just like the effectiveness of the whole conversation as a whole going into that, rather
Yeah.
than just trying to throw into it right now.
Ooh, let me tell you one other thing. When people lose their batteries, something you said in there provoked it for me. As you lose your battery, you also lose track of what your goal is and what you're talking about. So that's how it also devolves into. And here's the other 47 things about you I don't like that literally has nothing to do with this thing that we're talking about. But now that I've lost track of what I'm doing, I'm just going to bring those up and just make this even worse.
Oh man, that's so good. Yeah, because people, when we're emotional and feeling in that fight response, almost like we want to, like that comes out as almost like ammo for our fight. Like no, like it's like I'm gonna beat you down and win. And how often does that work? It's like,
Uh,
yeah,
it depends on your goal, really. Because
it's
if
like
you,
exactly like if you're in a cage or on the street, like you got to be
yeah,
down. But
but
otherwise,
a great heuristic that works well for a lot of relationships is if somebody wins the argument, the relationship loses.
oh, that's cool. I like that.
And while it doesn't apply to every single one, it applies enough that it's worth thinking about a lot.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. If somebody wins the argument, the relationship loses. Cool. All right. So another one. So like, what about when it's an unexpected kind of like well basically you have entered a fight, an argument, whether it be at work, in a love relationship, or whatever it may be. Like, kind of, what are some ways to decide what, in essence, almost stand your ground, or to make it more of a deflection, avoidance, push away, walk away, whatever it is.
Well, I'm going to answer a different question than what you asked because I don't think most conflicts are any sort of surprise. I don't
Okay.
think they can be unexpected. So let's take it off of important relationships. I know which bars in town are the rough bars. If I walk into one of the rough bars and I get into a conflict, how is that unexpected? Like, why am I surprised? So, same thing, you know the people around you. You know which coworkers are shitty. I mean, are you really shocked that you're in a conflict with Tammy because you were in a conflict with her last Friday and the Tuesday before that and the Monday before that? Like, so most of these things are actually not unexpected. Now, to answer the question you're really asking is like, okay, I'm not intentionally entering this. This conflict came and found me. It's actually not a bad idea to spend a little bit of your battery deciding how you want to handle future conflicts. Like, here's one. I know this is going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow or 30 years from now, but I'm going to have it happen again. Somebody is going to overcharge me for something on my credit card. If it's $10 or less, I probably won't bother doing anything about it other than just calling the credit card company. I'm not going to call the vendor. I'm not going to do much about it. Not because I like losing the $10, but because I've pre-decided that it's really not even worth my time to worry about that, because I'll just see another, counseling appointment or supervision appointment or teach another class, and I'll make that back plus more. So like, why would I spend a ton of my battery trying to fight for $10? Mm-hmm. So you'll see me make that decision all day, every day. Same thing with, my love partner. If I go home and she comes at me with a conflict immediately, I already have my decisions made about how I'm going to handle that. Because if you have a love partner, guess what? Conflicts are coming. It's not unexpected. Because I don't know how long you can live with another human being without a conflict. But I can't do it forever.
Right.
So pre-deciding some of this stuff is okay. Like when your love partner, here's some great questions for the listening audience. When your love partner comes at you with the next conflict, what's it going to be over? You probably already know. Is it because you don't do the dishes enough? Is it that, they keep asking you for a date and you keep saying no? Is it, and even if it's unreasonable, even if it's like, hey, I know you work 24 hours a day, but also I want you to spend your time on this thing. Like, what the conflict's going to be probably. Go ahead and spend a little bit of your battery planning. Like, how do you want to address that? Don't let it be unexpected, because it's probably not.
Something that I actually picked up from a business podcast or YouTube. I think it was actually YouTube, but I feel like it fits right in, but both in business and in a lot of cases in a love relationship, would be, remember, a lot of times if someone brings up like starting a conflict, starting a talk, a lot of times what they actually want is to feel validated or heard, and not necessarily be right. And on the business side, the one I heard, like, to give the example that I heard, was in essence, if like a customer comes to you with some form of complaint, they're not happy, whatever. When you mentioned if you get overcharged for a credit card, if you're the person dealing with it, or especially if you're a person who has like stake in it, even more so, like manager, owner for a small business, something like that. If you pretty much react almost if you react almost more angry at the issue, but at the issue, that it happened, not like trying to fight them, like not trying to defend, like, oh no, like, you said you were, this is what you wanted, we charged you for this, like, not entering it that way, but instead you react angrily that the person, like, at what the person said, and like, that should never have happened. This should have, like, this should have been better. This over here should have happened. It almost diffuses the situation, because by being more angry at the problem than the person you're talking with, like, so they almost, like, they calm down, like they're like, oh wow, like this person gets it, like they understand me, they understand what I'm coming from. And so, like, almost at worst, it at least like diffuses that and lets them see that you're actually on their side. And at best, you can actually improve a lot of things in that relationship, because they can either feel like they can talk to you more about it, or maybe they, again, saying that you care, they maybe want to enter into more contracts or do business with you more, things like that. I feel like that would, like, it could go that way, or it could be seen that way a lot in, like, say, in a love relationship too. Is if they come to you and you can see that it's actually more of like, hey, like, recognize what I'm saying is this problem, or that I have a problem with, and you can show that you actually don't like it either, and are and can see their side and all that. Like, I don't want to use the term like get angry in the love relationship again, but so just show that you really understand that point even more so, or then that could help again, like almost solve the like quote unquote solve or improve the situation without even without even going into the actual resolution yet.
Right. And it's back to approach it softly.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I mean, let's talk to the business owners for a second, and unexpected conflict. Like, do you really imagine you're going to run a business and one of your customers isn't going to like be mad at you over something? Because that's an unreasonable expectation. Pre-deciding, how am I going to approach this? And happily haven't been in business 10 years. I've got a lot of pre-decisions, but so here's an easy one that does happen every once in a great while. 7 times in the entire time I've been in business, I have accidentally double booked a spot. Now, happily, everybody's been nice about that. But if somebody did get upset about it, I mean, that would be fair because I'm screwing up what is essentially a medical appointment. And I've already pre-decided, like if somebody gets upset about that, I mean, I know, how I'm going to talk about it. I know some stuff I can't offer. I mean, can't offer them a free session in general because there's actually a surprising amount of rules about how you're allowed to price medical stuff and how it relates to, billing insurance clients versus cash clients. There's a lot of rules. So I can't actually even legally in a lot of cases give a free session. But I've already got somebody who's like, hey, you're right. I did mess this up. Can I make it right in this way? And I have never yet run across a situation where anybody I've dealt with that I actually have a relationship with where I approach the problem softly, where the conflict escalates. At worst, it stays the same for a little bit, and almost always it comes down and comes to a normal level where we're just talking about solutions now. We're not actually in an emotional, upset, and charged conflict.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, here's something. I don't know what's on your list there. We do have to talk about properly deciding about avoidance at some point today. So if that's not on your list,
no, yeah, I like where it's going to that. I mean, yeah, like so. I feel like the last one that I had here actually about this is again because like right now we're talking about kind of like the receiving end of conflict, like you said, like when it comes to you, whether it was what level of expected or not, but like just any quick, like I said, like using your battery to decide, like almost just like the key points to decide, like okay, you've received this initiative for conflict. Does this basically meet a minimum threshold where I feel like this is something I need to stand my ground on, or at this point, just like avoid it, let it happen? I hate to use the term roll over, but that could actually be unfortunately one way that people handle it. If someone's trying to get their way and you just let them do it, just in other terms, but like with that type of unexpected.
I love that term, and it already goes into what I was going to talk about.
Awesome.
That roll over is one of the idioms we use that lets us know that our ego's involved. Oh, we're rolling up, we're surrendering. When I decide to pursue or avoid conflict, well, I'm still moving towards whatever goal I want. That's active. That's not passive. That's not surrendering. Just sometimes I choose not to have that one, but I'm still moving towards the thing I want. But that's one of the things that gets people is they get their ego involved. And then it turns into, you can't talk to me that way. How dare you ask me for this? How dare you? And just, it turns into a mess. So I'm gonna say this as if it's simple, but it's not. So, this is a lifelong practice. Working to get your ego out of the types of conflicts you can be in is so helpful, because then you can stay focused on what's your real goal. One of my friends who's a divorce attorney, he tells people and a personal injury attorney, so he sues people on people's behalf, and he tells them straight out, don't sue people for the principle, because you're just going to pay a ton of money and get nothing. And if we shrink that down to not suing people, but just to like having conflict, doing it just to prove you're right or doing it just to serve whatever egotistical thing you have inside of you, all it's going to do is drain your battery a ton, and you're still not going to get the thing you want, because they're not going to admit you're right if your ego got involved. They might admit you're right if your ego is not too involved, which is the terrible irony of the whole situation.
That's really good, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, with the battery, like not just an acute battery right now, but even just a a longer term one is kind of save in a lot of ways. Like, hey, you can only fight for so many things at one time, and yeah, so like save it for the ones that matter. In essence, yeah, like if you're in essence like always entering conflict or arguments or trying to win things that you're right, again, like it loses effectiveness. Whereas if you're rarely do that, I feel like when you do, it gives you a little bit more strength to stand on. Or again, like people might even be more open to listening to you if they know you're not that person.
Right. And let's go, because I plan to talk about this. That set of bullet points you just mentioned, I would like to direct anyone who argues with people on the internet to that set of bullet points.
Yes, that's awesome.
If you use your battery to argue with people on the internet, you would be well served to review how you spend your battery.
All the energy wasted. We might have flying cars by now.
Now, there are a few exceptions, and I want to point to you as one of the exceptions, because you did something once that was so hilarious, but you clearly had a different goal in mind. That whole Amazon business where they kept sending you the wrong book. Now that was so amazing. So for the listening audience, if you didn't get to be a part of this, Jerry ordered a book, and they kept sending him the wrong book. So he got a hold of Amazon. Please send me the correct book. They were like, great, got it. And they sent him the exact same incorrect book. And what this turned into was a web series of like unboxings, like, the new Amazon box has arrived. What's going to be in it? We don't know. And in a way, he was like kind of trolling Amazon, but he wasn't really arguing with Amazon. The goal was to like provide entertainment and content to his audience, which was amazing, because I was tuning in for the unboxings and like, oh shit, let's see what happens. And so that's a wonderful example of like, yeah, I mean, it looks like a conflict, but the goal was not that. The goal was something else. And you just took it and ran with it. And I that's why I'll remember it forever, because it was such a wonderful example of how to have conflict. That was a little bit of conflict, because you kept calling Amazon, but you were using it for a different purpose. So it was great. And you achieved that purpose. Because I mean, I still remember that content for 3 years later, 5 years. How long ago was that?
It was either the COVID year or the year before that.
Okay, so 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it's been a while. And I actually want to finish that up with a great way to, again, like basically finish the conflict. And this is actually something we probably didn't plan to talk on at all, is you can be, or someone else can be like a third party finish to a conflict. Because
the author finally like sent you the box.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, because somebody working for the book company who was not involved in the transition or communications at all, because like you said, it was like Amazon providing it, found out about it, and again, not in any way, just somebody, a mutual connection basically was like, hey, check this out. Found out about it, and he went above and beyond, and like sent me the correct thing and then extras, just to be like, hey man, I want you to know, like, this is crazy, this is going on. And I said, like, talk about, again, a way to like just end it all and like again, like really overdo anything that's expected or needed and create a great impression. So I said, now I even think about that. That can be another possibility in this, is like, if like you might see a conflict and realize that you can actually go step in and like finish it, or give it a positive spin or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So furthering on with avoidance now, actually, what are some of the ways like you prefer to advise people on what to do here to actually just avoid it in the first place?
So it's back to what's my goal here. So I mean, heck, let's talk to the people who get into this out in public. Let's go to the bar example. Did I come to the bar to prove I'm a tough guy because somebody like stepped on my shoe or something, or jostled me, or did I come to the bar and meet some friends and have a good time? And what a lot of people will do is the first time that something happens that offends their ego, they will immediately forget what their original goal was, and they get into the ego goal of I've got to prove something to somebody, who knows who, and then take that. And I like starting with that because that's a slightly ridiculous example, and people can connect with the ridiculousness of it. But then if we put it on other things, it's actually the exact same principle, but people feel differently about it. So I mean, when you're at work and that one customer says something untowards to you and you get mad, what's your goal? Is your goal to like get inside of your ego and like, wreck everybody's day by like coming back at them hard? Because then your boss got to get involved. They're going to have something bad happen. I mean, maybe your coworkers, who knows? You're going to wreck somebody's day with your ego. What's your real goal? I mean, if you're there as an employee, your goal is to make money and go home. Now, there's a few exceptions to this. Some jobs are so horrible that like the goals become different. But I'm talking to most people who are semi-satisfied with their jobs. When it's your love partner, a lot of people accidentally inside their head use that rollover language. Oh, I just got to roll over and take it. What's your goal with your love partner? Is your goal to get inside of your ego and prove something to them? Or is your goal to create a loving, lasting relationship? And deciding to behave towards that oftentimes involves letting stuff go, avoiding conflict that you could easily have. And we can go through 17 more examples, but it all ends up being, what is my goal here? Is my goal to serve my ego? If not, there's a solid chance I should consider whether I should avoid this conflict.
Like avoidance, to me, it brings to mind just like a picture of like almost just like stoicism, or at least like the old Stoics, because so much of their advice and their teachings that you see, whether actually in books like the Stoic Handbook or something, or the Daily Stoic, or just like filtered on the internet, things like that. So much of it is about simply like not letting things get to you, letting things go, focusing on yourself, and really like kind of like you're saying, I feel like that's the key to so much of the avoidance is like like if it's not like immediately threatening, like actually threatening, like you're saying, not like perceived threatening to your ego, but if it's not actually like threatening to you or loved ones, to a way of life, just letting go. Like, it actually reminds me of I ironically use this analogy a lot is like proper defense in martial arts, or like in because I remember, I feel like one of the things that's taught a lot in beginner class, like either in beginner classes or simply martial arts that aren't necessarily attuned to real life, to real life a little bit, is you'll see like blocks or defensive moves, and you like what you see is people doing it and they're reaching out like like away from them, like 2 feet from it. Like I'm very big on the, if I'm practicing and like deflecting, I really want the person to punch at me. And same thing, if I'm working with somebody, I am going to punch at them. Maybe not, obviously in a hard way, but I want it to be that way because I want it to be a realistic situation. But what you see in so many of these classes is, like you can stand still and the person punches like 2 feet to the right side of your head because they're like, I'm throwing a punch, but I'm not going to hit you. And that develops bad habits of let me block your fist out here. And when I first started picking up like again a more like for me it was MMA, kickboxing, boxing style, or just a more like realistic sense of it. It was, hey, if you can tell that thing's going to be like, if that thing's going to miss you, don't do anything. Like, don't waste your energy or like possibly open up to an attack by deflecting something that doesn't need it.
Here it is. Okay, I was so excited to see where I was like, okay, how's this going to relate? And now we're there. I see.
Yeah, so it's like if it's not like right inside where it's actually going to come at me, I just don't react, which actually makes my reaction to other things. It almost looks like I have zero reaction a lot because people will do stuff or throw things, and it might go right past my head, and it looks like I didn't even see it or don't react. But it's just like I spent so many years teaching myself and training to only react to things that are actually coming at me that I just ignore the rest. And
let me go to that for a second because you're saying there. Let me add something to it and make it really usable. That is perfect because pursuing conflict over things that are actually harmful is valuable. Pursuing conflict over things that aren't, that's where it becomes questionable. That's where I talk a lot about ego stuff. But let's talk about a great one that many people have had. There's a lot of people who have had to get in conflict with a medical provider of some type because the medical provider wants to do something or not do something, and that's the medically wrong decision, and a patient has to stand up for themselves and get into conflict with the doctor to make the thing happen that is important for their health. That's a great example of when it is correct to have conflict, because for the love of God, don't let yourself get hurt by avoiding conflict.
Or insurance.
Getting into conflict over mistaken goals and things like ego is different. But if somebody, if you're at a job and they want you to do something absurdly dangerous and you're like, no, I will not be doing that, and you deliberately go into that conflict, that's a great example of when, and so your martial arts example is terrific. Like, yeah, sure, you do your defensive moves when you're in danger. Mm-hmm. When you're not in danger, think harder about whether conflict or avoidance is good. But yeah, if you're in danger of some type, 100% move into the conflict if that's going to help you be not in an unsafe scenario.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you understood where I was going with that.
Yeah, it took me a second because I was like, well, man, I'll listen to martial arts stories all day long, but I'm not sure what's going to happen here.
It usually takes me a while to get to my point with stories.
Like Grandpa Simpson, you had an onion on your belt, which was the style at the
time. So is anything else you wanted to really go into, or do you want to wrap it up?
So let's hit the bullet points. So conflict or avoiding really is all about what is your goal. Is getting into a conflict going to be helpful in some way? Is that going to fulfill some kind of goal, or is that just going to serve my ego? Is avoiding conflict the thing that's going to get me closer to my goal? Because there's a lot of times when letting stuff go is just really more useful. There are 20 things you dislike about every single one of your friends, but they're all tiny. Correcting those is needless conflict. And certainly it's okay to get into conflict when there's a safety issue, if getting into conflict is going to assist you in staying safe. Avoiding conflict and therefore being unsafe is very nearly always a wrong move. There might be some exception to that rule, but I can't think of one right now.
Awesome, brother. Well, all right, everybody. Again, hope this helps you just find ways to, really almost ease stresses a little bit in your life. Like I said, like so often we get worried.
Protect your battery.
Yes, exactly. Protect that battery. Again, like stand up for what you need in your life. But like I said, take that honest assessment, whether anytime you come up with a conflict, like, is this my ego talking? is this just some desire to be right, or is this actually important to me and my loved ones? And it's a lot, like we've been saying, a lot of times that division will help you like see what you're really fighting for or trying to defend and make a better decision from that point on. Again, thanks for listening. Remember, check out the podcast itself. Is found on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, Asymmetric Habits. And like I said, our general schedule is releasing new episodes usually on Wednesdays or Thursdays. You will find new episodes like this one generally uploaded the very next week as the next episode, and then us putting some of our old archival material in between the weeks to still give you some valuable insights in between. So, all right, again, Jonathan Pishner, Apex Counseling, Jerry Handley, Viking Performance Training, and we'll catch you guys later.
See y'all.